Hi, and welcome to this segment of Unconventional. I'm Enimai Chediar, the Federal Director of the Justice Action Network. And today we'll be speaking with Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, who represents Pennsylvania's 14th Congressional District. Congressman Reschenthaler was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018. Prior to that, he served in the U.S. Navy JAG Corps, served as a magistrate judge, and as a state senator. While in the Pennsylvania State Senate, he championed the first in the nation Clean Slate Act, which became law in 2018. He's quickly become a rising star in the Republican Party, with Maverick PAC listing him on this year's Future 40, which honors the next generation of conservative leadership. And on Capitol Hill, he's used his standing as a leader among freshman Republicans to continue calls for federal criminal justice reform, working across the aisle to forge new relationships to get the job done. Today, we are very excited to speak with the Congressman about his criminal justice priorities. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman.
Imai, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And please just call me Guy. No Congressman, just Guy.
Thank you. So with that, I just want to start off with a little background. So can you tell us a little about why you care so deeply about criminal justice reform and why it's become such a priority for you?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So there's a lot of different factors that drove me to making this part of my platform and what I work on now that I'm in Congress and what I was doing when I was in the state Senate. But first and foremost, just with my background, I was a prosecutor in the Navy JAG Corps when I was in Iraq, and when I was stateside, I was a defense attorney. So I saw both sides of the criminal justice system there. And then, of course, having been a magisterial district judge right outside of Pittsburgh, showed me a lot of the flaws that we have in our criminal justice system. And I quickly began to realize, both as from my time as a defense attorney in the Navy, and then also as my time as a magisterial district judge, that the root cause of many of the problems was substance abuse issues. And furthermore, the substance abuse issues were by and large caused by an untreated or undiagnosed mental illness. So for right away, when I was on the bench, I started to use substance abuse screening, mental health screening, to make sure people got the care they needed. Because if we could solve the underlying problem, we could reduce the recidivism rates that way. So that was a really big cornerstone of the short period of time when I was a judge. And then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I have a really good friend. We were friends at my first job when I was a lifeguard. And one summer she didn't come back, and we weren't sure what happened to her. I finally reconnected a few years later and found out that she made some bad decisions. And she and I have become friends, of course, becomes friends again, of course. And I saw her struggles as she was trying to re-enter the workforce, and with the stigma of having a criminal conviction on her record for something she did when she was very young. So just a personal story that drove me into this. And that really is what led me to drive Clean Slate, because when I was in the state Senate, I saw that we could help a lot of individuals that had nonviolent criminal offenses. And if we could just give them I hate to say clean start, but a clean slate, it would destigmatize them, and they'd be able to pursue the American dream to the fullest, unhindered by the record. And again, they've already paid their debt to society. These are nonviolent offenses. Let them unleash their full earning potential.
Yeah, thank you. You actually touched on something that I want to get a little bit further into. So you talked about criminal records. So the Clean Slate Act, and obviously in Pennsylvania, and the federal one, and these ones that have popped up in other states, are designed to solve a very specific problem around criminal records. Can you explain a little about how a criminal record can create such problems for someone, and what the exact problem is that these types of bills are designed to address?
I'd love to. So let's just look at some stats right off the bat. You have about 1 in 3 Americans that have some kind of criminal record. Now, whether or not that's a felony or a misdemeanor, you still have 1/3 of Americans, 1 in every 3 Americans, having this record. And this comes into play when individuals go to apply for college, because roughly 3 out of 5 colleges, for example, will screen on criminal records, landlords will screen, employers will screen. So you'll have these individuals that maybe made a bad mistake, paid the price to society, did whatever they could, but they still have this record that's hanging over their head. And that prevents them from getting the jobs they want, from living where they want to live, from going to the institution of higher education that they want to attend. So it really hinders them. And I view this as a criminal justice issue, just like I view it as an economic issue. So, for example, if we were to destigmatize these individuals' records and give them a clean start, a clean slate, then they could earn more money. They'd have more future earning potential. Arguably, the recidivism rate would decline as well. And we would have a huge economic benefit to our GDP, as well as these individuals would have a huge economic benefit themselves. So I do view it primarily as a criminal justice issue. But recently with the COVID negotiations, I've been really focused on the economic benefit of clean slate legislation, because that way we can argue that it should be in a future relief package. And I should say that Lisa Blunt Rochester is the co-sponsor on this legislation. She's been absolutely incredible to work with from Delaware, and she and I have tried to champion this issue. But what it is it's an automatic sealing of records for simple drug possession cases after 1 year. For other nonviolent crimes, the individual would be able to petition the court to seal the record. So I think that's a great chance for individuals. Again, this is 1 year after, and an automatic sealing for drug possessions. And it's important that we have some automatic functions, because a lot of times these individuals are trying to get back on their feet. They don't have the money necessarily to pay an attorney or to make the court dates. So the more automation we can put in the system, the better.
Yeah, thank you. So can you tell us why you think these types of bills have such strong bipartisan support?
Well, I think it makes total sense that you have the Republican Party now kind of rediscovering criminal justice reform, because we have a strong libertarian slant in the Republican Party that's been forgotten for some time. But as true conservatives, we should believe in limited government and the ability for an individual to have redemption in the criminal justice system and in society, and also just to be left alone from government. So that's why I think a lot of individuals on the Republican side of the aisle view this as removing scarlet letters. They don't like the government intervention coming and stamping somebody and saying you were capped at earning potential, or because you've done X in the past, you can't do Y in the future. So it's a lot about individual rights and liberty. So it's a fairly easy sell with the more libertarian-minded Republicans. And then across the aisle, Democrats have championed this for a while. So I'm glad that you're now seeing both sides coming together and seeing how worthwhile these issues are. And again, I just want to highlight, the more we can stress the economic benefits to this, the better we'll be, because the more persuasive these arguments will be as we show the connection between reducing recidivism rates, growing the GDP, making sure there's more skilled workers in the workforce. And so from an economic point, it makes sense. And then, Amy, if I could just say real fast, it's also important for future recidivism rates. So for example, if you have somebody incarcerated, that's costing $32,000 on average a year. That money would much be better spent on substance abuse and mental health care, particularly outpatient care, where a defendant can still maintain a job, be fully functioning in society, paying taxes, contributing to his or her place of employment, and getting help for the substance abuse or the undiagnosed or untreated, or heretofore untreated mental health issue. So it makes a lot of sense from an economic point. And then lastly, the recidivism rate. When I was a district judge, I saw so many people that kept coming before me for over and over. And I was only a district judge for about a year and a half or so, and I had these repeat offenders. If you could just solve the underlying issue, which again is usually a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue, if you could get that person a bed in a treatment facility rather than a cot in a jail cell, it's going to mean that person is more likely to get on his or her own feet, not come back in. We will stop the jail to prison, or I'm sorry, the jail to streets revolving door, and it will reduce court costs. It would reduce costs of policing, et cetera. So it also makes sense as just being a good steward of public funds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So on the same topic of clean slate, can you tell us about the impact that this bill has had in Pennsylvania?
It's been a staggering impact. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember just how many people have taken advantage of the program, but I want to say it's close to a million, if not over a million now. And so a lot of people are now getting that second start. So it's been very beneficial here in Pennsylvania. I'd like to see it, of course, replicated on the federal level, but also state to state general assemblies. I would like them to see them take Pennsylvania's example and carry it forward. I must say, though, the one drawback to Pennsylvania's program is that it's a 10-year waiting period. Now, we were the first out of the gate, so of course, we didn't get everything we wanted. But in the future, I would urge my former colleagues in the state General Assembly here in Pennsylvania to revisit the 10-year time period. That should be much shorter. The bill I have with Lisa Blunt Rochester, like I said, is 1 year, which is good, but something on the lines of 1 year to 3 year for other states looking to replicate would be more ideal.
Yeah, what's really remarkable about that Pennsylvania bill, not only the impact specifically in Pennsylvania, but also that it's inspired this whole national movement for Clean Slate Act. So we see this popping up in states across the country, and obviously now a lot of momentum at the federal level too. So that's great. So I want to pivot a little bit to another really important issue in criminal justice reform, which is another issue you're very much engaged on, which is women in prison. And so this summer, you partnered with Representative Karen Bass of California to introduce the Protecting the Health and Wellness of Babies and Pregnant Women in Custody Act. So can you tell us what made you interested in this bill and why you think this reform is so necessary?
Well, one of the things that really got to me was a Zoom meeting that we had, or Facebook Live hearing that Chairwoman Bass and I had, and that was where we heard from women that were pregnant while incarcerated, and some of the stories of the deficiency in diet. For example, we had one individual testify that her prenatal diet regimen included one extra peanut butter and jelly sandwich a day. I mean, clearly inadequate. Also, the mental health issues that were being unaddressed during pregnancy, clearly a problem. So when Chairwoman Bass approached me about joining her bill, I jumped at the opportunity because clearly there was a problem, and any chance to work with Chairwoman Bass, who's incredible to work with, by the way, I'm going to take that opportunity. But what this bill does is it standardizes care for women that are in federal custody, both before and after birth. And we're talking about mental care, physical care standards, as well as mental and dietary needs. So if we can have one standard, it will help a lot. So I think this bill is going to help a lot. And it's not only helping the women, it's helping the families, and it's helping the child to make sure the child is getting cared for both before birth and after birth. So it's a great bill. And again, it was a pleasure to work with Chairwoman Bass on the legislation.
Thank you. So you're sponsoring a few other bills on criminal justice reform as well. Can you also tell us about the One Stop Shop Act and the Justice for Juveniles Act?
Sure. So the One Stop Act is another bill I had with Chairwoman Bass, and it's a great bill. So what it does is this: it focuses on individuals that are just leaving federal custody, and we got to remember again the stats on this. You have over 600,000 individuals each year being released from custody. So if we can help those individuals right away and make sure they have employment, make sure they have mental health care, make sure they have community assets at their disposal, it will greatly reduce recidivism rates, which of course should be our ultimate goal with criminal justice reform. So what this bill does is it provides grants and incentives to have a one-stop shop. So someone that's just released from custody doesn't have to run all over the place. They can go to one location and get everything they need, from job placement, leads on job training programs, mental health care, substance abuse issues, et cetera. Basically everything that individual needs to try to get back on his or her own feet once released from custody. And if you look at it, your recidivism rate now in the United States is upward of 60%. That's an abysmal failure. We need to focus on reducing that recidivism rate. And if I could just digress for a moment, a lot of folks that are critical of criminal justice reform they like to say that it's somehow being soft on crime. It's quite the opposite, because when you reduce the rate of recidivism, by definition, you are eliminating future crime. So I challenge you to think of a way that you can be tougher on crime than literally eliminating future crimes from happening by reducing recidivism rates. So we need to have a paradigm shift and look at this as being tough on crime through reducing recidivism rates. But the Juvenile Justice Act, just real briefly, Mary Gay Scanlon had that bill with Kelly Armstrong. I was an original co-sponsor too. But what it does is, if you're an individual under 22 years old in custody, you don't have to exhaust your administrative remedies. Excuse me if I'm talking like a lawyer right now, but typically when you're in custody, you've got to, before you file suit, you have to exhaust your administrative remedies. Well, that's all well and good, but the problem is a lot of times these administrative procedures are complex. People get tangled up, and to ask somebody who's 17, 18, 19 to have the wherewithal and the ability to navigate this labyrinth is just too much. So we can streamline it and make sure that individuals that are victimized in custody can go right to filing suits, streamline the process. And look, I'm a big believer that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if we can go into a court of law and expose any abuse that's occurring, then that's better yet, because we're going to be able to provide transparency and eliminate the abuse right away.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the public safety and the economic perspectives that you're giving are really important. And I think that if more people understood that, we would definitely have more criminal justice reform and more champions such as yourself. So I think that you laid those out very well. And here at the Justice Action Network, we have definitely been trying our best to ensure that more and more people are able to understand those kind of arguments. So one constant theme with all of these bills that you've talked about is that they have a really strong bipartisan support and strong bipartisan champions. And the Justice Action Network, as you know, bipartisanship is something that we believe is extremely critical to criminal justice reform. Can you tell us more about your experience working across the aisle on justice reform, and specifically about your friendship and partnership with Representative Bass? I know you have a number of bills that you're co-sponsoring with her.
Sure, I'd love to. I'm a big believer that even if you're in a position where you don't need to have bipartisan support, you should have it anyhow. It just makes for better legislation. So, great example, when I was in the state Senate, we had a veto-proof majority as Republicans. We had 34 out of 50 seats in the Senate. So we had a veto-proof majority. We didn't need any Democrat support to get anything through. I still made sure almost every one of the bills I had a Democrat co-sponsor on it, because I truly believe that the bills are better when they're crafted, when you have both voices. You also will always have a champion on the other side of the aisle that will help you get co-sponsors. So I picked up a really good habit when I didn't have to. Coming into Congress, where Republicans are in the minority, we have to have Democrat co-sponsors. So it was good to get training in the state Senate. But I think it makes for better bills. I really do. And the fact that Karen Bass has been so great to work with, and of course Lisa Blunt Rochester and I have had a bill together, and she's been incredible too. It really makes for better legislation because both sides of the aisle are represented. And I also think you have built-in ambassadors for the bill on the other side of the aisle. So it's much easier for me to go to a Republican and talk that Republican into joining on or voting for the bill. Just like it's much easier for Karen Bass or Lisa Blunt Rochester, another Democrat, to go to her side of the aisle and get individuals to jump on or prevent amendments that would come in to be poison pills. So it just makes for an easier time getting it through, and it makes for better legislation ultimately. I can tell you that what we're facing though is we're playing defense from the middle, because people that are trying to get this legislation through, we're faced with a dual challenge. The Democrat co-sponsors are faced with the challenge of beating back amendments that would make the bills unpalatable to Republicans. Republicans are facing the need to get more Republicans on these bills and convince them that it is being smart and tough on crime to get them on the bill. So we're playing offensive, trying to move the legislation through, of course, but we're also playing defense, trying to bat down amendments that might become what we as legislators call poison pills, which would kill the bill ultimately.
Yeah, thank you. So speaking of Republicans and Democrats, we are less than a week away from the election. needless to say, it is, or it is and will be fairly contentious. But once the dust settles from this election, can you tell us more about your plans to continue to work on these issues come 2021, regardless of who wins the White House?
Well, regardless of who wins the White House, I've already had discussions with Chairwoman Bass on other ideas for bills. We've already started discussing possible bills to move forward in the next Congress as well. So I don't think look, obviously, I'm rooting for the Republicans to win and for the president to get reelected, of course. But regardless of who wins, I still think there's a path ahead on criminal justice reform issues, and that could be everything from making sure we do advance clean slate. If it doesn't advance this time, it could be taking another look at the First Step Act, which passed before I was in Congress, but seeing if we need cleanup on that. It could even be looking at issues like civil asset forfeiture and how that can be abused. So one of the things about criminal justice reform is it's multifaceted. So under whatever administration or whatever the composition of Congress or the Senate might be, there's always room to work on some aspect of criminal justice reform that could likely get passed in a bipartisan nature.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there is huge momentum and opportunity to pass federal legislation regardless of what the makeup of the next White House or Congress looks like. So that's actually all I have. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about or add, but those were the main topics I had wanted to cover.
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the support because you make it so easy to advance this issue and really make it easy on legislators to get other lawmakers involved and on board with what we're trying to accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And of course, also thank you for your continued leadership on this really important issue. We're really excited to see what this upcoming year brings for bipartisan criminal justice reform and for your leadership on the issue too. And thank you to our viewers for tuning into this installment of Unconventional. We will see you next time.